This video is probably just going to be a bunch of rambling. Some of it might even be a little nonsensical, so if that's not what you would like to listen to, then sorry. But have you ever stopped to think about the state of arcades nowadays? Like, where did all the fun and actually entertaining games go? Feels like most arcades nowadays don't even have actual games. Instead feel more just like child-inclusive casinos. At least, that's what it feels like where I'm from. There's maybe a total of like 2 good arcades in my area, and I really want to understand what went so wrong with arcades in this modern era. Disclaimer first for this section, I didn't grow up during the era of 80s and 90s arcades, so please excuse me if I get anything wrong, but I've heard one too many stories about arcades from back then, just from my dad alone, so I feel like I can't not mention arcades from that era. The 80s were probably the most popular era for arcades, with all those so retro classics being released around that time, with Pac-Man coming out in 1980, Space Invaders in 1978, and Donkey Kong in 1981. This was truly the time to get outside and go to an arcade with some friends, just to have a blast for a while. Arcades at the time were pretty much the only place you could play video games, as the home console market had not been developed too much just yet. So I can imagine arcades were pretty popular at this time, for good reason. Skip forward a bit to the 90s, and you'll hit what is my personal favorite era of arcade games. Admittedly, a lot of those games are fighting games, like Street Fighter 2 and Marvel vs. Capcom 1. But this era also brought about some other amazing games, like Crazy Taxi, Metal Slug, and shooter games like Raiden and Dodonpachi. I would have loved to grow up with arcades like this, but I got stuck with shit like Dave & Buster's and Chuck E. Cheese. However though, around the mid to late 90s, the home video game console market started to blow up. With consoles like the PlayStation in 1994, the N64 in 1996, and the Dreamcast in 1998. This was about the time that arcades really started to decline in popularity. Just because why go to an arcade when the arcade's in your living room? Personal shout out to the Commodore 64 game system released in 1990. You had like 20 games and you were a total commercial failure, but you were still the GOAT. But truly, this time was rough for in-person arcades, as home consoles were starting to become a mainstay in most homes. And plenty of arcade games eventually did get ported over, in some form at least. Personally, I believe the emergence of the home console pretty much led us to where arcades are right now. People no longer want to go to arcades, just because there's no real reason to. The arcade is now in your living room. You don't have to go to a whole new establishment just to play video games. You could wake up in the morning, go sit in the living room, and sit in front of your TV and play all the games you'd ever want.
Come on now.
Why would you ever need to keep around loose change when you could just buy a home console? I mean, you probably spent as much as it cost at the arcade anyways. It's not like you can't invite your friends over to play on your console. So what's really the point in even going to an arcade? Arcades are probably at the worst point they've ever been right now. When I said that there were 2 good arcades in my area, I was not exaggerating at all. It's really that rare to find a good arcade depending on your area. Me and my friends actually have a sort of tiering system to rate arcades, and it goes a little something like this. You have Dave & Buster's at the bottom, otherwise known as kiddie casinos. Round 1 in the middle, they're actually pretty alright with their game selection. And Arcade Odyssey at the top. Arcade Odyssey is the only arcade that I can say I regularly come back to. The selection of games there fits my taste perfectly, and I could really only think of a few machines that I have never touched before. Outside of their whole collection of pinball machines. Family Guy Pinball is the best one there, and the other ones just don't really feel right. Arcade Odyssey has a really nice mix of both classic American arcade games and imported Japanese machines, and it really just feels like heaven to walk through and experience. I feel like that's what most big arcades lack right now as well. If you look at any of the big chain arcades, like Dave & Buster's and Chuck E. Cheese, and even Round 1 to an extent, they really all feel pretty much the same. But when you look at a really good arcade, it's almost like an insult to consider these places as the same type of establishment. You know, that really makes me think. Probably the main reason why arcades are really garbage now is really simple. There just isn't really a market for arcades anymore. Unless you're a real weirdo like me, or a die-hard arcade enjoyer also like me, most people would rather just buy a home console to play games on. No matter all of the absolute gems of games they miss out on at real arcades. The other big reason, probably, is that all the really big arcade chains are just all solely focused on profit at this point. I mean, that's also why they all have something else to entice people. Round 1 has their bowling alleys, Dave & Buster's is a sports bar, Chuck E. Cheese is for children's birthday parties. I mean, they're just solely focused on profit. That's all they really care about. I challenge you to walk into a Dave & Buster's and find 5 machines that don't award you with some kind of spendable points on your cards. That's how it works, right? I've not been to a Dave & Buster's in like 5 years. Big arcades like that just really only cater to children and toddlers. The ones who wouldn't know a good game even if it hit them and they're still developing head. As long as the game has colorful enough lights, it'll be a 10 out of 10 to them. And getting a reward for playing enough video games through some kind of prize shop, they'll definitely be coming back. Even if their new toy probably costs less than $1 to make. That's exactly the reason why I called them kiddie casinos earlier. It's really just gambling, but for children. Unfortunately though, that's just how it is for 99% arcades now though. Because that's what makes the money. You know, it's kind of like YouTube to an extent. I mean, you've seen YouTube Kids. You bring in the real views just by catering to children. I mean, look at all the view counts on every nursery rhyme video ever. What I'm trying to get at though is that you aren't gonna make it huge in the arcade industry without some scummy business tactics. Those tactics just involve selling your soul and desecrating the arcade image even more. I mean, I guess there's still kind of a silver lining here at least. Finding that one really good arcade makes for a fun little journey. I still remember that one night me and my friends pulled an all-nighter just looking at arcades in our area. But that discovery was probably the best thing to happen for us in a while. It was about 2.5 years ago that we first stepped foot into that arcade, but it really was an experience of a lifetime. I mean, maybe the world would have been better off without home consoles being a thing. Probably wouldn't have as many kiddie casinos now, at least. I mean, but also there are a lot of really good games that wouldn't work in an arcade setting, so maybe not. But it's also undeniable that home consoles pretty much just killed the arcade experience. Or at least was a major factor in it. I just wish that arcades didn't turn out this way though. It's really saddening to hear about how fun arcades used to be, and then look around and see nothing but absolute garbage. But I guess for every million kiddie casinos, actual casinos, and other pathetic excuses for arcades out there, there's always an arcade odyssey. If you like this kind of video where I just ramble about something I'm interested in, please press the like button and maybe comment something if you're feeling it. Lets me know that people enjoy this. Even then, I'll probably end up doing something like this again anyways. This was honestly just fun to write down my thoughts. And, you know, get it out there. I have a bunch of other things on my mind that I want to write about. And this is probably the easiest way for me to just get something out there at least. I mean, the video editing process is also pretty fun too, for these kind of videos. I've got a couple more I'm working on, so maybe I'll upload them eventually, if I'm not lazy.